Did you know that Montana, despite being the fourth largest state in the entire United States, has fewer residents than some single neighborhoods in New York City or Los Angeles? That's right, while Montana's land stretches wide and wild, only around 1.1 million people call it home. To put that into perspective, the population of Dallas alone is larger than the entire state. So why do so few people live in a place that boasts dramatic mountain ranges, crystal clear rivers, and national parks so breathtaking they've made it onto countless postcards? The truth is, Montana is stunning, but it's not always an easy place to live. From extreme weather to economic challenges, there are plenty of reasons why Americans hesitate to settle there permanently. Montana is often romanticized in movies and travel magazines as the last frontier of open skies, endless prairies, and rugged mountain life. And in many ways, it really is. But once you dig below the surface of those glossy photographs, the practical realities of life in Montana start to emerge. If you've ever wondered why this massive state remains so sparsely populated despite its beauty, the answers are rooted in day-to-day realities that most people wouldn't want to face. Let's dive into the 15 main reasons why most Americans admire Montana from a distance rather than calling it home. 1. The brutal winters. Montana is no stranger to winter, and when it comes, it doesn't hold back. The state experiences some of the harshest cold snaps in the country. Temperatures regularly plummet well below zero, and wind chill makes the cold even more punishing. In some towns, winter can easily stretch from October through April, meaning nearly half the year is dominated by snow and ice. It's not just the cold, it's the lifestyle adjustment that comes with it. Residents often find themselves shoveling driveways multiple times a week, equipping their vehicles with snow tires or chains, and preparing for blizzards that can shut down roads for days. A simple commute to the grocery store can become an expedition when heavy snow hits. While some locals embrace skiing, snowmobiling, and ice fishing, the reality is that endless snowstorms and below freezing mornings are exhausting for most people. Imagine leaving for work when it's still dark at 7 a.m., scraping thick ice off your windshield with numb fingers, and arriving home in pitch black cold at 5 p.m. for months on end. That kind of routine wears people down. For many Americans, Montana's winters are simply too much to handle, especially compared to milder states. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe and uncover the hidden stories and curiosities of each U.S. state that no one else will tell you. 2. The isolation factor. Montana is massive, over 147,000 square miles, but spread thin across all that land are just over 1 million people. That means fewer neighbors, fewer services, and fewer amenities. For perspective, the population density in Montana is about 7 people per square mile. Compare that with New Jersey, which has over 1,200 people per square mile, and you can understand why life here feels remote. The vast openness means long drives between towns. In fact, it's not unusual for residents to travel hours just to reach the nearest major shopping center, airport, or hospital. A trip that would take 15 minutes in suburban Illinois might take 2 hours in Montana. That isolation makes basic conveniences harder to access, and emergencies become real concerns. For younger people, the isolation can feel suffocating. Entertainment options are limited, nightlife is sparse, and cultural events are rare outside of the larger cities like Billings or Missoula. For retirees, the concern is often about healthcare access, because when the nearest specialist is hundreds of miles away, peaceful living suddenly feels more like a risky gamble. In short, Montana's isolation appeals to some who crave solitude, but for the majority of Americans, it feels more like being cut off than being free. 3. Limited job opportunities. Montana's economy is heavily based on agriculture, mining, tourism, and energy. While these industries are vital, they don't provide the diverse job market found in more urbanized states. Many Montanans work in farming or ranching, jobs that demand long hours with relatively low financial reward. Tourism offers seasonal employment, but it's far from stable. Professional opportunities in fields like technology, finance, or large-scale healthcare are limited. While remote work has opened doors for some, internet connectivity in rural areas can be inconsistent, making even that option tricky. Younger generations who grow up in Montana often leave for cities in other states because that's where the better paying jobs and career growth are. For perspective, the average wage in Montana sits below the national average, while costs for essentials like housing and groceries continue to rise. That financial imbalance means many people can't justify staying in the state long term unless they inherit land or have deep family ties to agriculture. For most Americans, the lack of economic opportunity is one of the biggest deterrents to living in Montana, no matter how beautiful the landscape may be. 4. Skyrocketing housing costs. It might surprise you, but Montana's housing costs have surged in recent years. The influx of people from other states, especially from California, Colorado, and Washington, has driven up prices dramatically. Towns like Bozeman have seen housing costs double, making it difficult for locals to afford homes in their own communities. What makes this especially frustrating is that the increase in housing prices hasn't matched wage growth. While home values skyrocket, incomes remain relatively stagnant, renters face steep competition, and buying a house often requires salaries that simply don't align with local job markets. This situation has created a paradox. Montana is still considered a rural state, yet in some towns its real estate market now mirrors high-demand metro areas. For Americans seeking affordability, Montana is no longer the bargain it once was. And for those with limited incomes, the housing issue alone makes moving there an unrealistic dream. 5th Wildfire season. When people think of Montana, they often picture snow-capped mountains and peaceful valleys, but in summer, the state faces a very different threat: wildfires. Fueled by dry conditions, high winds, and dense forests, Montana's wildfire season can be devastating. In recent years, entire communities have been evacuated, and air quality across the state has plummeted due to smoke drifting for hundreds of miles. Living in Montana during wildfire season means dealing with weeks of smoke-filled skies. Visibility drops, outdoor activities become unsafe, and health advisories for vulnerable groups become frequent. Residents often need air purifiers in their homes just to breathe safely. There's also the looming threat of property loss. Ranchers, farmers, and homeowners in forested areas live with the anxiety that one spark could destroy everything. For Americans weighing the idea of moving to Montana, the wildfire risk is a harsh reality check. The beauty of the landscape comes with a fiery price, and many people decide it's not worth the gamble. 6. Healthcare access challenges. Healthcare in Montana is not only expensive, it's also hard to find. Rural hospitals and clinics are few and far between, and many struggle to stay open due to low funding and staffing shortages. That means residents often travel long distances to see specialists or receive advanced care. Imagine living in a town where the nearest hospital with a trauma center is 3 hours away. For routine checkups, that might be manageable, but in emergencies, those hours could mean the difference between life and death. This lack of medical infrastructure discourages families and retirees alike from moving to Montana, despite its slower pace of life. Adding to the challenge is the shortage of healthcare workers. Doctors and nurses often prefer larger cities with better pay and professional networks, leaving Montana with fewer providers per capita than the national average. For Americans who prioritize healthcare security, Montana feels like too much of a gamble. 7. The sheer size of the state. Montana's wide open spaces sound romantic, but they create serious logistical issues for daily living. Driving across the state from east to west takes nearly 10 hours without stopping. For context, you could drive through several East Coast states in that same amount of time. This massive scale makes travel within Montana time-consuming and expensive. Gasoline costs add up quickly, and winter road conditions make long drives even more stressful. Residents often spend entire days traveling just to attend an event, visit family, or handle basic errands. For many Americans accustomed to suburban convenience, where shopping, schools, and services are just minutes away, the idea of spending hours on the road just to get somewhere is simply unappealing. Montana's vastness, while beautiful, becomes a burden when it's your everyday reality. So far, we've looked at 7 of the biggest reasons why Americans shy away from Montana: the brutal winters, the isolation, the lack of jobs, high housing costs, wildfire risks, healthcare challenges, and the sheer size of the state. Each of these on its own might be manageable, but together they paint a picture of a place that is as difficult as it is beautiful. And yet we're only halfway through. There are still more surprising, practical, and sometimes quirky reasons that explain why Montana remains one of the least populated states in the nation. 8. Limited entertainment and cultural options. If you're someone who thrives on concerts, art galleries, major league sports, or international cuisine, Montana will likely leave you disappointed. The state's entertainment and cultural offerings are minimal, especially outside of cities like Missoula or Bozeman. And even in those towns, the selection is modest compared to cities of similar size elsewhere. For example, catching a Broadway tour, a major film festival, or a professional sports game isn't an option unless you're willing to travel out of state. Many Montanans make long drives to Denver, Seattle, or Minneapolis to enjoy events that other Americans take for granted in their hometowns. Even food culture is limited. While there are excellent local restaurants, variety is scarce. You'll find steak, burgers, and regional favorites, but if you're craving diverse international dining like Thai, Ethiopian, or authentic sushi, options are few and far between. For Americans used to cultural vibrancy, Montana can feel culturally starved, and that lack of variety is enough to discourage many from settling here long term. 9. Poor public transportation. Montana's wide open spaces make owning a car not just convenient, but absolutely necessary. Public transportation is nearly non-existent outside of a handful of larger cities. Billings, Missoula, and Bozeman offer limited bus services, but routes are sparse and they don't connect well to surrounding areas. For those without a car, mobility becomes a major barrier. Imagine living 20 miles outside of town with no reliable transit system. Getting to work, school, or even the grocery store means driving long distances. Gas prices add up, car maintenance is constant, and winter road conditions make driving treacherous. Contrast this with cities like Chicago, where subways, trains, and buses make car-free living possible. In Montana, there's no such alternative. For younger Americans, especially those who can't afford a car, or for older individuals who no longer want to drive, this lack of transportation infrastructure is a deal breaker. 10th, education challenges. Montana takes pride in its community schools, but the challenges are undeniable. Many schools in rural areas face teacher shortages, limited funding, and outdated resources. Class sizes may be small, but the lack of advanced courses, extracurricular programs, and specialized instruction can leave students with fewer opportunities than their peers in more urban states. Higher education has its own hurdles. While Montana State University and the University of Montana provide solid programs, options beyond those are limited. Students seeking specialized degrees or research opportunities often leave the state and many never return. This brain drain has long-term effects on the workforce and economy. For families weighing where to settle, education quality is a top priority. When compared to states with stronger academic infrastructure, Montana's limitations in both K-12 and higher education push many Americans to look elsewhere for raising their kids. 11th, seasonal tourism overload. Ironically, one of Montana's greatest strengths, its tourism industry, is also one of its biggest challenges for residents. During peak summer months, when Yellowstone and Glacier National Parks attract millions of visitors, local communities are overwhelmed. Roads clog with out-of-state vehicles, grocery stores see shortages, and prices for everything from gas to accommodations spike. For locals, this means adjusting their lifestyles around tourist season. Simple errands become frustrating, and peaceful trails or lakes suddenly feel overcrowded. Even healthcare facilities and emergency services can get strained when visitor numbers swell. Living in a tourist hotspot might sound glamorous, but the reality is often stressful. Once the season ends, many businesses scale back operations or close entirely, leaving locals with fewer options. This boom and bust rhythm of seasonal tourism makes year-round living in Montana less appealing to many Americans. 12th, unpredictable weather beyond winter. While Montana is famous for harsh winters, its weather throughout the year is notoriously unpredictable. A sunny afternoon can quickly shift into a violent hailstorm, or a warm spring day can suddenly bring heavy snow. Locals joke about experiencing all 4 seasons in a single day, but it's not really a joke. These dramatic shifts affect daily life. Farming and ranching operations are constantly vulnerable to sudden frosts or hailstorms that can wipe out crops. Outdoor activities, from hiking to fishing, often require backup plans because of abrupt weather changes. And let's not forget wind. In some parts of the state, gusts exceed 60 miles per hour, strong enough to knock over trees and cause power outages. For Americans who prefer predictable climates, think mild California or steady Florida, Montana's volatile weather feels exhausting. The constant uncertainty adds stress to daily routines, making life here less appealing. 13. Limited retail and shopping options. If shopping is your therapy or convenience is your priority, Montana is not the place to indulge. Outside of the larger towns, big box stores and malls are rare. Online shopping can fill the gap, but delivery services are slower and shipping costs may be higher due to distance. Need specialized products or services? Be prepared for a road trip. A resident might drive 3 hours to buy a particular appliance or visit a store with more than just basic clothing options. This scarcity extends to professional services too. Things like specialized auto repair shops, high-end salons, or niche hobbies often require significant travel. For many Americans accustomed to having multiple options within a 20-minute drive, this limited retail landscape feels like stepping backward in convenience. The lack of variety and access to consumer goods is another reason people admire Montana as a vacation spot, but avoid it as a permanent residence. 14th, wildlife encounters and safety concerns. Montana's wilderness is awe-inspiring, but it comes with real risks. Encounters with bears, mountain lions, and moose aren't just stories. They're realities that residents prepare for. Hikers carry bear spray, homeowners secure trash cans to deter wildlife, and rural residents sometimes deal with livestock lost to predators. Even smaller animals like deer create hazards. Vehicle collisions with wildlife are common and often dangerous, especially at night or in winter when roads are icy. Insurance companies report higher claim rates for vehicle-animal collisions in Montana compared to many other states. While many Americans enjoy spotting wildlife from a safe distance, the idea of living in constant proximity to large predators is unsettling. The beauty of Montana's untamed wilderness doubles as a reason people hesitate to make it their permanent home. Before continuing, remember to subscribe to the channel and stay up to date with what no one else is saying about the situation in the US states. 15th, political and social divide. Montana has a unique cultural and political identity that doesn't align neatly with either conservative or progressive expectations. Rural areas lean heavily conservative, while college towns and cities like Missoula trend more liberal. This divide creates tension, especially around issues like land use, resource development, gun rights, and environmental policy. For newcomers, integrating into local communities can be difficult if their views clash with the dominant perspective in a given area. Some Americans thrive in environments with political diversity, but others find Montana's sharp contrasts uncomfortable. Combined with the state's relatively homogeneous demographics, social life can feel isolating for those seeking more diversity and inclusion. This cultural landscape adds yet another layer to the reasons why many Americans hesitate to call Montana home, even if they admire its scenery. By now, we've explored all 15 reasons that explain Montana's low population despite its vast size and natural beauty. From harsh winters and unpredictable weather to limited job opportunities, housing affordability, healthcare shortages, cultural scarcity, and even wildlife risks, the challenges stack high. But here's the interesting part. For the small number of people who do live in Montana, many of these problems are embraced as features. They see isolation as freedom, wild weather as excitement, and cultural limitations as an opportunity for simplicity. Still, when looking at the big picture, it's clear why Montana hasn't drawn in the same numbers as other states. We've gone through all 15 reasons, from the unforgiving winters and wildfires to healthcare challenges, housing costs, and cultural isolation. Each one on its own is significant, but when combined, they explain perfectly why Montana remains so sparsely populated despite being one of the most beautiful states in the country. Now let's zoom out. What happens when you put all these factors together? What's the bigger picture that explains Montana's reputation as the last best place? A title that captures both its wild charm and its persistent difficulties. Let's break it down, layering the realities of Montana living in a way that shows how these obstacles escalate for anyone considering a move. Imagine a family deciding to relocate to Montana because they fell in love with Glacier National Park on a summer trip. At first, the idea is thrilling. Mountain views, fresh air, space to breathe. But soon, the daily realities set in. Winters last for months, and suddenly heating costs soar while commutes become icy slogs. The lack of nearby hospitals turns every illness into a nerve-wracking event. Grocery runs require long drives, and those drives are made worse by unpredictable weather and wildlife on the road. Meanwhile, housing costs costs in the few desirable towns remain high, while wages stay low. The parents struggle to find diverse job opportunities. The children attend schools with fewer extracurriculars and limited advanced programs. Social life feels thin, with few cultural outlets and entertainment choices. This isn't an exaggerated picture. It's the everyday reality for many Montanans. And for outsiders who try to make Montana their new home, these overlapping challenges can push them to pack up and leave after just a few years. Why tourism and living are two different things. Tourism in Montana thrives because short visits highlight the state's strengths while masking its weaknesses. A visitor hiking in Yellowstone or skiing in Big Sky gets a concentrated dose of beauty, adventure, and relaxation without facing the long-term trade-offs. Spending a week in Montana is magical. Spending a lifetime there is complex. Tourists don't have to worry about whether their local hospital has enough staff or whether they'll be snowed in for 3 days when trying to get to work. They don't have to plan for wildfire smoke clogging the air every August, and they don't have to worry about whether their kids will one day need to move out of state for a better education or job. This difference between visiting and living is crucial. Many Americans see Montana as a perfect vacation spot, but hesitate to make it a permanent address because they know the realities are harder than the postcards suggest. Comparisons that put Montana into perspective. To really understand Montana's challenges, it helps to compare it with other states. Take Colorado, for example. Both states boast majestic mountains, ski resorts, and outdoor recreation, but Colorado has a more diverse economy, stronger healthcare access, larger cities with cultural vibrancy, and more reliable infrastructure. That makes it far more attractive to newcomers than Montana, even if Montana has just as much beauty. Or consider Texas, another large state with rural stretches. Texas also struggles with heat, storms, and isolation in certain areas, but it balances that with booming job opportunities, a wide variety of cultural offerings, and multiple major cities. Montana, by contrast, doesn't have that counterbalance. Even Alaska, often called Montana's closest cousin in terms of rugged wilderness, benefits from strong oil revenues, unique state programs, and a cultural identity that embraces its remoteness. Montana lacks that financial safety net, making its challenges hit harder for the average resident, and these comparisons highlight why Americans choose to move to other scenic states while leaving Montana lightly populated. The difficulties are real, and unlike elsewhere, they aren't offset by bigger rewards. Who does choose Montana? Despite all these reasons, some people actively choose Montana, and understanding why is just as revealing. The people who settle here permanently tend to value solitude, outdoor recreation, and a slower pace of life above all else. They're often individuals who either have the financial resources to absorb the state's challenges, or those whose livelihoods, like ranching, tie them directly to the land. Retirees with stable pensions sometimes find Montana appealing because they aren't dependent on local wages. Remote workers, provided they have reliable internet access, can also make it work, but these groups are relatively small compared to the larger pool of Americans who prioritize economic stability, convenience, and cultural variety. This selective population explains why Montana's numbers remain so low despite the national fascination with its landscapes. The psychological barrier of harsh living. Another subtle but powerful reason Americans avoid Montana lies in psychology. People generally prefer comfort and predictability. When faced with the choice between a state where winters last 3 months versus a state where they last 7, most will pick the former. When deciding between a city with 3 hospitals and one with a single underfunded clinic, they'll gravitate towards security. Montana demands resilience, and not everyone is prepared to muster that resilience year after year. The human tendency toward easier living is a driving factor in why many admire Montana from afar but never take the plunge. Montana's low population creates a paradox. On one hand, it makes the state attractive to people who crave wide open spaces and fewer crowds. On the other hand, that very lack of people limits resources, economic diversity, and cultural vibrancy, which in turn makes it harder to attract new residents. It's a self-reinforcing cycle. Few people move there because there are so few people already there. That cycle explains why Montana, despite its immense immense size and natural riches, has maintained such a small population compared to other states. Montana is one of the most breathtakingly beautiful states in America. Its endless skies, rugged mountains, and pristine rivers capture the imagination of anyone who sets foot there. But beauty alone doesn't sustain daily life. The challenges, brutal winters, unpredictable weather, isolation, lack of healthcare, limited job opportunities, high housing costs, minimal entertainment, scarce transportation, wildlife risks, political divides, and more, create a reality that most Americans simply don't want to live with. The irony is that these very challenges help preserve Montana's charm. Its low population ensures that its wildness remains intact, its landscapes stay unspoiled, and its communities retain a unique character that would likely vanish if millions suddenly flocked there. In a way, the reasons why Americans don't live in Montana are the same reasons why Montana remains so alluring. It is a place that refuses to conform, a place where survival is earned, not given. So, the next time you see a photo of Montana's rolling plains or jagged peaks and wonder why more people don't live there, remember, the land is beautiful, yes, but beauty and practicality are not the same thing. For most Americans, Montana is best admired on a summer road trip, a ski weekend, or a once-in-a-lifetime national park adventure. For the few who do stay, it's not just a place to live, it's a test of endurance, patience, and devotion to a lifestyle that most people simply aren't ready for. Now that you know all this, would you live in Montana or would you prefer another state? We'd love to read your opinion in the comments and see if we agree. But first, be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on anything that almost no one dares to reveal about the states of the United States.